President Lyndon B. Johnson wasn't the most popular politician in the world, but his achievements are mixed. Johnson was responsible for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Acts of 1965. But he was also blamed for putting Americans through the Vietnam War. Before he became president, he was a young sailor in the Navy. On June 9, 1942, he was assigned to fly a B-26 Marauder airplane, nicknamed the Wabash Cannonball. Just before takeoff, he had to use the bathroom. When he came back, Lieutenant Colonel Francis R. Stevens took Johnson's seat. He was forced to take the next flight, the Heckling Hare. Johnson was incredibly lucky, because Heckling Hare saw very little combat. But the Wabash Cannonball was shot down by the Japanese, killing everyone on board. This means that a bathroom break very literally saved his life and changed American history. King George II of England reigned from 1727 to 1760. On October 25, 1760, King George II had just finished a delicious cup of hot chocolate, and went to use the bathroom in Kensington Palace. He was straining so hard that he had an aortic aneurysm. Doctors could not save him, because he was dead just moments after sitting on the toilet. After studying his body extensively, they diagnosed him with an aortic dissection. An aortic dissection is a serious condition in which a tear occurs in the inner layer of the body's main artery, aorta. Blood rushes through the tear, causing the inner and middle layers of the aorta to split. This would later go on to help diagnose and prevent deaths for thousands of people who were suffering with the same problem. In 1899, Drive, Oscar Minkowski ran into his colleague Joseph von Mering at the university library. The two got into a debate over the pancreas. They disagreed if someone could survive without their pancreas or not. Dr. Minkowski believed so strongly that people could survive without it, that he removed his dog's pancreas. At first, the dog appeared to be fine. But then Minkowski realized that flies were starting to surround his dog's pee when he took him for a walk. After studying the urine, he realized that it was now full of sugar, and the dog had become a diabetic. Because of this, scientists were able to realize that the pancreas secretes insulin. For most of history, workers were not allowed to take bathroom breaks whenever nature called. Henry Ford was once quoted calling the digestive system the disassembly line. The Jim Beam distillery even forced women to report when it was their time of the month, since bathroom breaks were meticulously tracked on a spreadsheet. In 1998, OSHA finally made it a law that workers should have the right to access the bathroom, unless there is a reasonable reason to temporarily delay them. Hennig Brand was a German 17th-century alchemist. The ultimate goal of alchemists was to figure out a way to change base metals into gold. They were also trying to find the Philosopher's Stone, which was supposed to grant its user immortality. In 1669, Brand collected a whopping 1,500 gallons of urine from everyone he knew. He baked and boiled the urine to see what was left once the liquid had evaporated. The point in this was because water was necessary for life, and he wanted to see what happened to water once it passed through a person. He believed that he might find a key to eternal life. What he found instead was a white powder that glowed in the dark. This was phosphorus. Douglas Engelbart was an engineer and inventor who was an early pioneer of the Internet. He was the head of the Augmented Human Intellect Research Center at the Stanford Research Institute. Like many engineers in the field, Douglas decided to experiment with LSD. One day, when he was high, he invented something called the Tinkle Toy. This was a miniature water wheel that could be installed on the side of a toilet to help encourage young children who were potty training. During another LSD trip, he conceived of what would be the modern-day computer, even though he didn't invent it. But he actually did invent the computer mouse. On July 7, 1937, Japan and China were on the brink of war. The Japanese Imperial Army surrounded the Chinese city of Wanping. A private named Shimura Kikujiro had to use the bathroom, so he broke ranks in order to duck into the woods to relieve himself. Unfortunately for him, his unit had left by the time he finished. He became lost in the dark, and couldn't find his way back. Meanwhile, the Japanese officers realized that they had a missing soldier, and started to panic. They sent troops back to Wanping, and demanded to be let inside to find their missing soldier. When the Chinese refused to let them enter, the Japanese tried to breach the city walls. This was later called the Marco Polo Bridge Incident, and it started the Second Sino-Japanese War. The very first gendered bathroom to be documented in written history was at a Parisian ball in 1739. At the time, the guests thought that this was rather eccentric and fun. Gendered bathrooms emerged in the Victorian era, when widespread plumbing was just beginning to appear. Unfortunately, a lot of facilities would only provide male-only restrooms. This encouraged women to stay home, or they had to hide going to the bathroom under their skirts by relieving themselves in the gutter. It wasn't until 1887 that Massachusetts passed a law demanding that employers provide female bathrooms for their workers. It finally became normal to have both men and women's bathrooms in the 1920s. This next one isn't a bathroom break, in the sense of relieving yourself, but it was still a huge historic event that took place in a bathroom. In ancient Greece, Archimedes was challenged to figure out if a crown made for the king of Syracuse was pure gold or not. He thought long and hard but could not find a method for proving that the crown was not solid gold. Soon after, he filled a bathtub and noticed that water spilled over the edge as he got in. He realized that the water displaced by his body was equal to the weight of his body. This became known as the Archimedes principle. As the legend goes, Archimedes was so excited by his discovery, that he jumped out of the bathtub and ran down the street naked shouting, "Eureka!" about his discovery. During World War I, a mathematician and physicist named William Lawrence Bragg was stationed in France. In 1915, Bragg was using a military outhouse that was totally closed off to the outside world, except for a pipe that reached down to the ground. While he was sitting on the toilet, a gun was fired 1,000 feet away. The energy traveled through the air, and up the pipe right up Bragg's bottom. He eventually realized that this energy came from the gun's low-frequency infrasound. After this discovery, it dawned on him that each weapon had a unique frequency. He created a small empty wooden ammunition box with a thin platinum wire that could detect infrasound. With this, he was able to pinpoint the exact location of enemy weapons within 150 feet. This helped the Allies win the war. Elvis Presley is remembered as the king of rock and roll. In August 1977, Elvis Presley was just 42 years old, but his drug habit made him look much older. He was on the toilet reading a book called The Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus. His official cause of death will remain a mystery until records are declassified in 2027. But most historians believe that it was cardiac arrhythmia. Some sources online claim that Elvis was constipated for 4 months leading up to his death due to his drug use. And by straining on the toilet, it caused him to have a heart attack. Of course, there are conspiracy theorists out there who believe that he faked his own death in order to escape the limelight.